All right, we are live. It's Thursday. It's The Positive Effect. We're back for a weekly broadcast. And my name's April Sobral. I'm the host of The Positive Effect and the founder of Retail U. And this broadcast is really to talk about the positive effect of leadership and retail, my two favorite subjects. And today I've got Rick Planos on my show. Welcome, Rick, to The Positive Effect.
Thank you, April. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. So before we get started into your story, I'm just going to set us up. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome. Put your name in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from. And if you're back, I can see a few of you back. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to say this, share it, share it, share it. Share this post. Get it out to as many people as you can. And you can also subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify because it gets downloaded into a podcast afterwards. So with that, I'm so excited, Rick, to have you on my show because you've been my LinkedIn buddy for a good number of years. I love LinkedIn. Just find the best people on here. And I feel like we've had simultaneous lives in retail.
And a fan of your book.
Thank you. So we're going to get started into your story because, our audience is a retail crew and they show up every week and listen in to learn about our stories and, our wins, losses, successes, lessons learned. And so I want to start off by asking you, how did you get into retail? I know Ron, our friend, coined that accidental career phrase. So was it accidental or was it intentional?
No, that's the one part of Ron's book I don't fit in with. I was not accidental. I was stupid crazy, to be honest. I always wanted to be in retail. I'm part Greek, and maybe, merchants are a big thing in Greece. It's much more elevated than in the US, but I had every reason not to be. I went to a Big Ten school. The retail program was buyers or designers. I was going to be neither. It was 90% female. It was in the College of Agriculture. I'm colorblind, something that I really didn't go public with till maybe I was 50 because I was so ashamed that was going to end my, when I got out of college, many of the bigger retailers gave color tests, so I would never pass. And I was really kind of an introvert. Hard to believe now, but I had to take speech for people with stage fright. But I just had the thing that there's something else in retail that I would like. And once I got in, I'm like, I'm just going to work harder than everybody else. And, that'll get me somewhere someday. And I loved it. And I've done it. And it's been such a wild ride. And I told my kids, it's like, have a plan and then trash it, because I look back now and it's like, my plan was nothing as good as what turned out.
Oh, I love that. Have a plan, trash it. I love my guests on this show because I just love these one-liners and these pieces of advice that I learn every week.
Oh, just crazy when people think like at 18, you can plan your whole life. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I had this idea and I'm the only one I know that stuck with the same thing all these years.
So when you started off in retail, because you've worked some pretty significant brands, where did you start? And then walk us through a bit of your retail journey, like the positions, the companies, and this is people watching this get inspired to see like what can they achieve and, some lessons learned along the way. I'd love you to share that with our audience.
Well, keep in mind, this was a couple of weeks ago, so it wasn't quite as current. But when I started, I was hired as a management trainee like 2 weeks out of college. I couldn't believe it. And I was getting paid what I thought was crazy money. It was double digits. Like CPAs were making like $10,400 a year, and I was making $10,400 a year. I'm like, I couldn't spend it all. I'm like, that's how long ago it was. But I was a management trainee at Woodfield Mall, and I was like, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. I'm like in the, one of the coolest places in the world. And I was in a family-owned company that did formal wear. It doesn't exist anymore, like several of the places I've been. And I got in and I was like, I am so lucky to have this job. And it wasn't all glamorous at all, but I had a boss that believed in me. And I just worked harder than anybody else. I didn't care if it was 80 hours a week. And I just was like, I'm just going to really work hard and make this work because I'm so proud that I have a job that's a good job. I mean, jobs weren't as hard to get as they got to be later, but I just loved it. And my boss believed in me. And I guess that was a huge blessing. And I spent 7 years there.
Wow.
Yeah. But I ended up like literally getting promoted fairly quickly because I worked hard. And then I guess I was 24 and they had assignments out of state. I'd never been anywhere, at all. And I was like, well, I'm living by myself. I don't have a girlfriend right now. I'll go. And it was crazy. It was like 25% raise, and they flew me home every other month, and they rented my apartment. They paid for an apartment and a car. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like a millionaire. You know, and it was Arizona. I'm like, and I'm from Chicago. I'm like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And so, and because I did that, and again, it was a great lesson for me. My parents lived in the same house, you know, since I was in third grade. They're like, that sounds kind of crazy. And I'm like, I know, but it's, you know, I went and I worked my butt off, and I got promoted at 25 to regional, and all the regionals were 35 to 50.
Wow.
And the biggest thing, I mean, and it was all because I took that chance, and I moved, you know, a couple other times, and they said, you know, you've got it. And the biggest advice we can give you is don't tell anyone your age, grow a beard, and dress conservatively. So literally, I mean, thank God I was Greek. I grew a beard, and it was brown, like really fast. And I started shopping at Brooks Brothers.
Wow.
And everyone asked me, the franchisees would ask me how old I was. And I was like, what do you think? And they're like, 30. And I'm like, yeah.
That's so funny. Wow. And then you went on to some significant companies like Barnes and Noble's, Apple.
I mean, everybody was lifers, but I was like, you know, I probably should see what a bigger national company brand is. And I didn't know, but my retail friend said, hey, if you want to know retail, you got to be in women's. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm colorblind and I don't know women's. And I got hired at the Limited at the time that they were it was like, you were either at the Limited or the Gap.
Yeah.
You know, I was on the other side of you. You know,
yeah, so, I was at the Gap. Yeah.
But I mean, and I don't think they didn't know that I truly walked in the first day as a district home store manager, and I did not know a 4 from a 14.
Wow.
And at the time I was engaged, and my fiance explained it to me, and I'm like, okay, so that's how sizes work. And then literally I got subscriptions to 17 and Vogue, and like, because I was like, I got to study this. And then luckily they had color tags. I mean, they had color codes on the tags. So I figured out a way to figure out the colors by the numbers.
Wow, that's incredible.
Now I look back and think it was crazy, but at the time I was like, what if somebody asked me and I put together some god awful outfit?
I love that. But you know what? That's just overcoming adversity at its highest form. Like not being able to see colors and merchandising and selling retail, right? Like in retail.
And
holy crap.
It never ever affected me. And for the 7 years before, I was planning people's weddings. You know, I was like, at a time when people weren't wearing just black and gray, they wanted everything to match. It was even more dangerous. Yeah.
So you said earlier on, so you said earlier on you had a boss that believed in you. Okay. So how do you describe or explain a boss that believed in you? What does that look like? And what did that do to you?
It inspires you. I mean, there was so much practical knowledge I didn't learn at school. And it's still a cause for me. So I mentor in many organizations because everyone where I went to school, and it was a great school, they were professional teachers. And I was like, I wanted someone to say, hey, when I worked at XYZ, this is the way it was. And there wasn't that for me. So I really needed to add the practical knowledge now that I had the degree. And so my boss saw that I had a passion for that and saw that I was going to deliver on, you know, whatever I didn't know. I was going to work hard enough to either figure out or be a good student, and that I got the customer service part. You know, my grandfather was a restaurateur. My dad had a roofing business and was a fireman. So I came from a service background. So I knew like not to let the customer hang, you know, you fixed it, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that was a theme. Like I never was in a business that wasn't service focused. So I think I never would have taken a job like that where if the company wasn't really like, do whatever you have to do to make them happy.
Right, right. So you believe then in the power of leadership and the impact that we have as leaders on people?
It is so much more important. And I don't know, 10, 15 years into my career, I was like, this is why I'm here. It transcends the product and the brand, although both of those things are important to me. And I was never with a place that didn't have a good product or brand, but it was much more about what I was doing with my team And it was much more about getting them promoted than it was about myself, because when I got them promoted, I got promoted, or I got them ready to take my job and then I got promoted because I was the one that had a backup.
Oh, that's so key. Like, to get promoted, you need to have a backup, right? I tell leaders and coach leaders on that all the time. But a lot of people fall short in how to do that. They don't necessarily know how to develop somebody as a backup, or they feel threatened, right, to put somebody with all of their knowledge. So, Rick, what can you share about that? Because sounds like that's been your success. So,
Yeah.
like, how did you do that?
Well, first you have to be honest with yourself. Like, I knew, like, when I got into the limited, I'm like, I'm not good with colors. Okay. So if they have a planogram, I can execute it. But if they say, hey, dealer's choice, make a window pop, I can't do that. Okay. And I'm a dumb guy, and I've been shopping at Brooks Brothers. So I'm not a fashion savant. Okay. And at the time, you had to do hair. Like, I can't do hair. I still can't do hair. I never could do hair. They didn't tell me that when they got me hired. I might not have even taken the job. So I was like, okay, I was very upfront with everyone I hired. I'm like, by the way, understand it's not a 40-hour-a-week job. And what's your creativity? What's your fashion knowledge? And can you do hair? Because I need someone that can really make the windows look good, because that's important and I can't. So I was never the guy that was like, oh, I'm threatened because you're really good with hair or you're really good with displays. I knew that I needed to do either get better at it or hire someone that could do it. And so once they saw that, I'd say, okay, well, I'm really good with the P&L. So let me teach you that. And as I got to be a regional and a VP, it was more like, okay, well, everyone on my list, if I'm there for 6 months, I've got a list for each person of what I need to do with them, even if they only want to stay in the same job, and that's fine. But to be good at that job, this one's going to have to be better at hiring. This one's going to have to be better at coaching and counseling. This one has to be able to check in, whatever it is.
That takes a lot of vulnerability, what you just shared, to like admit what you know and what you don't know. We talk a lot about that in today's leadership, but back then, I mean, I was one of those people, but there was a lot of people around me that wouldn't show that vulnerability, and even today don't. So what advice do you have for somebody that maybe is struggling with that?
If you want loyalty, and I was in a business, I mean, when I was at the Limited, it was commonly known that there was a revolving door at the front because people came in and quit that fast.
Right.
So you really, unlike now where you would look for a company that had a right culture, you had to create the culture. So for your little group. So I was like, okay, well, they're looking at me more than anything else to be the leader. They're not as affected by what's going on at the home office.
Right.
And they know their reviews coming from me, and they know that their promotability is coming from me. So if I'm vulnerable, they'll be vulnerable. And I would much rather know that April's having a rough week and I should adjust accordingly than April lie to me and then end up quitting because she's embarrassed or something. It's like, I'd rather be honest about it and work around it. Because let's face it, we're not in a typical 9 to 5. You can just not show up when you've got to open the store. You've got to run a busy Saturday.
100%. What's the best piece of advice that a leader or a mentor ever gave you in your career, or something that was pivotal, that really like helped you along your way, that sticks in your mind? I know we have all those people, right, that gave us those one-liners or something, like, and it could have been like in a situation where it was some feedback you didn't really want, but like, what's something that sticks with you?
My life dramatically changed after the 7 years at the Limited. I needed those years to learn about execution, and I needed those years in the beginning to learn about working hard. When I got to Warner Brothers, I was blown away because everybody listened at the top. And from Peter Starrett, who is still somebody that I so respect, and he came from Federated, he put together this most amazing team. But I was used to store visits where it was top down. And they came in and you took notes and you had a legal pad. And if you didn't have 5 pages of notes afterwards, even if it was a good visit, you weren't doing your job or you weren't writing fast enough. And I'll never forget one time there was a blizzard. My boss couldn't make it. So, I was a district manager. He was the president of the company. And he came to do a walkthrough of a brand new store that I had set up with my team. And he's like, what do I need to know? And he pulled out a notebook and a pen, and I will never forget that moment. And that whole company ran that way. And that's why I stayed till it closed, because I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And district managers were directors. And we were at offsite meetings with the whole buying team and the whole executive team. And everything that was discussed would be like, they'd ask us, like, is that really the way it is in the stores? Is that what they want? Is that what they're looking for? And they would write it down. And I was like, I was so used to it. Like, you're not doing the right thing because the buyers know what's right, and you're not merchandising it right, or you're not selling it right, or your people are dumb. And instead it was like, no, we're in this together.
Yeah.
You're seeing the customer. Tell us what, they're asking for.
So important, right? Like 100%, like to go into stores and listen to those frontline employees. I talk a lot about that in my book, like listening, asking questions. Get really good at asking questions and listening, because they're going to tell you. And sometimes they're going to tell you things you don't want to hear, maybe. But you know what? At the end of the day, they're the ones that are engaged with the customers every day, right? Like they tell us what we need to know.
And the higher up you go, the more you have to listen and the less you have to talk, because you forget. Like when I first got to be regional, I got done with like my first week of visiting stores. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? I had to ask my boss. And I'm like, hey, two things. And it's like, they've called 3 other stores going, oh my God, Rick only likes black blazers or something. I'm like, what was that? And they're like, you had a black blazer on, right? I'm like, oh my God, I got to tone it down.
I know. You don't realize the higher up you go, the more influence you have. I guess I learned that as well. It was like, I'd say one thing and, and also like, yeah, like you said, the higher up you go, the more influence you have, but the more you need to get better at listening. That's why I used to show up at stores on a Saturday afternoon, like after my week, and be like, just put an apron on, get behind the counter and just work with the customers and just listen. And I think that's important, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of us that have been in that executive role now that are like really mentoring younger people coming into those roles. I remember when I first took my management role and I was like, oh, I have to be like more direct and I have to change who I am. And actually you don't. You just need to become more supportive, more of a listener, more engaged, and like let people talk. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? But people seem to forget that every day. People have a hard time listening, Rick.
Well, no, and the thing is, I think a lot of us, I know I came from this, where visits meant 2 overnights in the store, and you better be nervous. And then 2 weeks later, it was thumbs up or thumbs down. Like that was all the feedback there was. It was either good or bad. No, it was never developmental.
Yeah.
And so I was like you, like I was in stores on Saturday. I like to shop. I was in stores on Saturday and Sundays, but I did it always with a pocket of gift cards or something, McDonald's gift cards before there was Starbucks or something. And I did it to catch people doing something good. I mean, I didn't fake it, but I tried to always find the April who was selling really good or doing something great, so they knew that I was on their team. And so then it wasn't like, oh, when Rick comes in, it's all hell breaks loose and we all have to be nervous. It's like when Rick comes in, he's on our team and he wants us to do well. So if we're out of the red blouse, we can tell him and he can do something about it, but we better not BS him, because
Yeah.
5 other stores, and if they all say red's the worst color ever, he's going to know we weren't being honest and we were just making something up.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. It's like, you can be positive and be encouraging, because people say to me all the time, well, is that just happy-go-lucky? I'm like, well, no, it means you have to be competent. Like, you have to be competent at your job and be competent at your leadership capacity and the company's policies and practices. But you also have to be positive and encouraging at the same time. I don't think there's one or the other. Some people lean more towards people. Some people lean more to operations. I think you have to have the combination of both to actually create a really great retail environment and actually lead a team to competence,
Oh, I don't think anyone that works for me that's going to watch this is going to call you and say Rick was the pushover of the world either. I wasn't. I was different. I was challenging, but there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
That's developmental, and there's a way to do it that's a gotcha.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think you mentioned it before, you got to know that the further up you move, the less you are face to face with the customer. So either you're going to put on the apron and get behind the register at Christmas and listen to like hundreds of customers, or you're going to have to trust your people and be in the field a lot and see 20 stores in a week. And at the end of the week, go, okay, well, 18 of them all said this about red shirts, and one of them said this about the green earrings. So that one is a one-off, but the red thing is a big deal that I need to bring up at the executive meeting on Monday morning.
Oh, so good. How do you, okay, another question. I'm thinking, I've got so many questions I want to ask you, but I've got like limited amount of time. So I'm like, what do I want to ask you? Okay, what would you tell your younger self? Now, knowing what you know, you've been an executive, a vice president, you started at the bottom, just like me, you worked your way up to the top. What would you tell your younger self?
Trust your instincts, and more than instincts, I think if there's anything I would do over, and I heard someone say this the other day, they're like, you're not being honest if there aren't things you want to do over. There's things I would do over. I would have probably stood up for some of the things that I saw that were not probably honest or fair. Not that they happened, not that I did them, but they happened in a company that I worked for. I was married to a feminist. My daughter's a Wellesley grad and a feminist. I worked in female-centric businesses. Some of my best bosses were women. I never felt like I was abusive or prejudicial in salaries or anything like that. But it happened in the company I worked for, and I was like, that bums me out. Now I'm like, you know what? I was right back then to say this is wrong. I should have said it louder.
Oh, yeah. That's golden advice for anybody now, especially in the world that we're living in today, trying to have more equal opportunities and be allies to people 100%. Somebody asked me the other day, how do you be an authentic leader as well as play the political game? There's corporate politics, right? Like we all know that in offices. But now we're being challenged to be our authentic self. So they asked me this question. I thought, God, that is such a good question. So how would you answer that question?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one, I like to think I picked companies that weren't that political, and two, I was maybe only once based in a home office.
Okay.
So it was always, and that wasn't by design. It just kind of happened that way. So I think that made me a little less political because I didn't have to be. I was there for the meetings, and then I was back in wherever I was based.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. My piece of advice to her and anybody watching this is really think of the outcome that you want to achieve, right? And then be that positive collaborator of influence within the organization that you're in. So does that mean that you're not authentic? No, it just means that you're really developing those communication skills in a positive way to get people to work well with you. And I think that's what I did really well in my last job. I think, we went through a lot of turmoil. Everybody knows that. It was in the news at David's Tea. But it was such an amazing experience in terms of learning how to navigate all of that. And I was just always the person that was like, I'll help you even if you're not asking me to. So I helped every department, supply chain, everybody, so that when I needed to then present something, I was like, I had more buy-in because I was the person that would always help them and support their cause. So, and I'd also do it in a very positive way.
Yeah, I think that's so true, especially when you're the outsider like I was. Like when I was a couple times when I was with Warner Brothers and I was the VP of the franchise stores, we were a small piece and a franchise organization within a Hollywood company that was not a franchise organization. So I had to beg, borrow, and steal from these other departments to get what I needed for my franchisees all over the world. And you know what? I had been a good partner to them when I was part of the US business, and I continued to be. And I would come back with samples or ideas or pictures of things I saw in other places. And they knew that I was in it for the group and not just for myself. And the same thing at Omaha Steaks. The stores were a small piece of the company, but I was like, well, I don't know why we're all fighting each other fighting each other in our silos. Like, isn't it a win if the company buys online? I mean, this was earlier on in the internet. When the company buys online today and buys at my store tomorrow, like why would I want to undercut your price? They're like, wow, what an idea. You know?
How do you make work fun?
Oh my God, that's the best part. I guess I'm a frustrated party planner at heart, and I went gaga over my kids' birthday parties back in the day. And then I would bring that to retail. And then I was in some fun companies. Limited was known for their incentive programs. I mean, trips to France and all this great stuff. And Warner Brothers did it even bigger. And it was like, if you had something and it wasn't entertaining, you didn't get a good grade on it, So I went, wow. I mean, I'm a big believer in lapel pins, which I think came from the Gap, didn't it? Lapel pins. You should see, I mean, I have boxes and boxes of lapel pins. And for Christmas visits, it was like you had to have a great visit to get your lapel pin that was not available for sale. Literally a year ago, a former colleague of mine said, do you have any more of that lapel pin from this year? Because I worked so hard for that and was on a plane and Oprah Winfrey walked by and commented on it. And I gave it to her and I'm still mad because I can't get another one.
You gave Oprah Winfrey
the best 50 cents from China we ever spent,
Oh my Lord, I love that story.
But contests and prizes and incentives and recognition, and it doesn't have to be a lot.
No, it doesn't. I say saying thank you and sending a personalized thank you card goes a long way. Like it's a huge thing for me. I used to every Friday sit down and I would send out thank yous and like be real specific with people. And I say to leaders all the time, like have a positive folder in your inbox. When you get those emails and you get things, store it. Because when you're having a bad day, it's always great to pull up that positive inbox folder. Somebody taught me that a long time ago. It was when I first became a district manager. My old DM said, well, April, if you're not ready for recognition every day as a store manager and you're ready for the autonomy, you're probably ready to go multi-site. Because you're not going to get it every day. She's like, you're going to get a whole load more challenges. You're going to not have somebody every day like sending you an email. You might be if you're lucky, if you have a VP that does that, but you're probably not. So she's like, just do me a favor, put a positive inbox folder in your Outlook, and then just stash them in there. And when you need that positive emotion, just go in there and pull them out. And that I have carried around with me for 20 years. Honestly.
That's a good idea. I never had the inbox, but I did try the handwritten notes, but my handwriting was so bad. I found that I was it was a time when I had like 110 stores or something. So I see them twice a year. And I went in a store and they're like, oh, we were so looking forward to your visit. I'm like, why? And they're like, come in the office. And they had it pinned to the bulletin board. Like, could you tell us what this says? And I was like, oh, I'll go back to emails. They're a little older, but you can read.
So cool. So we're coming up on time. I mean, I love these conversations, but what didn't I ask you that you would love to share with, some young retail leaders that are thinking about, this is a career and what they want to achieve, and maybe some, words of wisdom, words of advice from Rick Planos that's, started at the bottom, worked your way at the top, worked for some significant brands. What would you want to share with them?
I mean, I think just that it can be such a great business and there's so many ways to go in it. It's like, it doesn't have to be, I really like gym shoes and I want to work for Nike. Okay. I mean, I take at-risk students from Chicago on tours. We went to Nike Town, but I showed them back room, what there was. And their marketing manager there was a temporary bagger at Christmas time. And that's how she worked her way up. And then we went to the Starbucks on Michigan Avenue across the street and they saw all the jobs there. There's so many ways you can go at it. There's distribution. So you don't have to be on the front lines. You don't have to be customer facing. You might be a visual merchandiser, or you might come in folding something to begin with and say, I really like this part of it. I really like planning and allocation. I really like, logistics. And I think that's what, people are like, oh, retail, malls are, disaster. No one wants to go to stores. Hey, I was in New York last week. I waited 2.5 hours to see the Harry Potter store and it was worth every minute. Okay. And I'm a tough critic. It was incredible. So stores are not dying. I mean, there's going to be a shuffle and a change, but there's going to be things like Shinola. There's going to be amazing new things as Harry Potter thing's going to go nationwide, I'm sure. There'll be new stores, but there's a million ways to go at it.
100%. And that is what I love about retail. I was at Parsons last week teaching some retail students, my experience in sharing, because I think that's what our job is now, to give back and mentor people and share what we've learned. But it's shifting all the time. And bricks and mortar is not dead. I say that all the time. There's brands that will open and there's brands that will close, and there'll be D2C brands that go, direct to consumer that go into bricks and mortars. I just read another one this morning that's opening some stores. And I think that's the nature of the market. 80% of sales still come from stores. Yeah. I've been in the malls recently. Malls are busy. People love to shop. Just got to be smart about the product and, the experience. And that's why I say it's so important, if you run a store, run a district, run a region, run the field operations, that you are a positive leader, because your experience, the way that you communicate, the way that you influence and inspire every day makes a difference to how the customers feel. If people feel good about what they do because of the leader they work for, at the end of the day, the customer's going to feel it. I wholeheartedly believe in that.
Yeah, that and the only other thing I would say is find a way to give back. You might not be able to in the beginning, but I think back like Maxine Clark at Build-A-Bear. How brilliant. Like every month there was a cause. There was always something to donate to. There was always a commemorative bear for something. I remember them thinking, oh, is this autism bear going to be a big thing? Oh my God, it was a blowout with people calling all the time. And even in my early days at the Limited, University of Illinois, who I thought, didn't have a good retail program, they're like, would you come down and do mock interviews? Would you come down and talk to our business students, the men, to tell them about what kind of careers they could have? So find a way. It doesn't have to be in your day-to-day work, but find a way to give back, because there's so many ways that you can help other people that didn't have the support, maybe didn't have the chance for the education that you got. I was lucky, very lucky. And, I still remember those people that helped me, and I tried to do the same thing.
I love that. Give back. We can do that more and more and more, whether that's just, like you said, it could be as simple as a student reaches out to you through LinkedIn and asks you for some of your time. I know you do a lot of that now, right? Like you do a lot of giving back to a lot of people.
I do. Thank you. But it's, and then like if I go in like with Make-A-Wish and I ask for something somewhere, I also make sure I find someone in the store that did a really good job, and I go on Yelp and make sure I give them a compliment. It's like it works both ways, especially today. I don't know what it is about COVID that made so many people so mean-spirited, but it's like those people on the front lines, if they're taking a chance, you're going to sneeze on them and get them sick. It's like, we should be nicer to them, not to them.
Yeah. And so, giving back. And as a retail organization, if they can have programs and things in place to give back, I think that's so important. I know that when I was at David's Tea, Me to We India was the number one selling tea. Yeah. Number one selling tea because of how much water it would create in India. And I remember going on that trip and just the impact of what it had. But the whole team got behind it and it gave us a purpose. And that's why at Retail U, we rolled out this, with a program with One Voice, One Team last year to get kids sponsored by a retailer to go through their leadership programs and our Retail U programs to get them into a retailer for a job. And I think our den have sponsored it, and they've had, 60 kids go through it, and 5 of them have got jobs now, and they're loving it. And they probably would have never got that job because they just didn't have the experience. So, there's so much creative ways you can do to give back. So I love that, Rick.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Because that Apple matches donations. Home Depot has this program where they will not only donate the product, but their team will go out and install the product. I mean, there's some great programs out there. And I think that also builds a team. Like we did Time to Read when I was at Warner Brothers, and twice a month we would go into LA and we would and we were part of Time Warner. So we took Time Magazine for kids and we read to kids, and it was great for it was a win-win all the way around.
Well, this has been an inspiring, enlightening conversation. I've got a ton of learns and lessons from you, as always, Rick Planos. You're such a pleasure to speak to. Honestly, your energy is great. And, my only regret is I wish I had worked with you. But, I get to hang out with you now, live, chat, learn more about you. And thank you so much for reading the book. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you, April. I appreciate it. It was fun being with you. And someday you're going to teach me how to write a book, too.
I will. I absolutely will. We're going to get all of your stories into something so you can share it with the masses. But that wraps up another show, another episode of the weekly Blythe, The Positive Effect. You can download it on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And I'm going to say it again, share this with your retail network, because these are golden conversations with my retail network that can, just have a positive effect on you, give you some inspiration. Maybe there's one thing you can take away from this that will create something new and, exciting in your retail work. So anyway, with that being said, we'll say bye for now.